Aftermath of legend. When the burning stopped, the sky was dark, not just with ash but with shadow, the lingering presence of ships too massive, too ancient, too alive to be anything but myth made flesh. The council chamber lay in ruin, its marble cracked by the tremor of orbital strikes that had spared the building only to prove dominance. The delegates cowered, stripped of arrogance, their laughter long dead. In the silence, a message replayed across every world, every channel, every mind. We were forgot, we endured, now you will remember. The galaxy had thought itself civilized, untouchable, beyond legend. But legends had teeth, and when the humans returned, they did not come as supplicants or diplomats. They came as the storm that clears rot from the forest. The council had laughed at myths. The academies had mocked the archives. The fleets had dismissed the warnings. But all their certainty ended the night, their sky went dark. And in the ruins, the survivors whispered a truth that would echo for generations. Myths walk again, humans are real, and the galaxy will never forget them. The great hall of the Galactic Council glittered with 1,000 banners, each one bearing the sigil of a world that considered itself eternal. They prided themselves on their collective wisdom, their dominion over the spiral arm, and their mastery of every force the stars had yielded. Within those vaulted chambers, civilizations older than empires spoke with voices polished by centuries of triumph. And yet on that day, the chamber echoed not with solemn debate, but with laughter. The subject was an old myth, one dredged up from dusty archives by a junior scholar who thought to entertain the council with curiosities of the past. The myth spoke of humans, a species so elusive that no living envoy, scout, or probe had ever seen them. The archives described them as restless wanderers, warriors without equal, who vanished into the void before the council's forebears had even taken to the stars. Some called them angels of destruction. Others called them shadows who walked in silence, appearing only when civilizations grew arrogant. But to the council, they were nothing. Stories told to frighten younglings. One delegate jeered, his voice echoing across the chamber. A species that can vanish without trace. Impossible. Biology does not allow for such myths, another scoffed. Humans are no more real than the fire spirits of ocean worlds, said a third. A bedtime tale for primitive minds. The laughter rolled like thunder, dismissive, arrogant. Even when the archivist attempted to read a passage describing entire fleets that darkened the heavens of their foes, the council roared with ridicule. For in their eyes, there were no heavens left to darken, no foe beyond their dominion. The myth was buried again under derision, and the galaxy went on, blind and proud. The first flicker of doubt. It began, as so many revelations do, with a signal. Far from the council's luminous halls, in the outer fringes of settled space, an observatory picked up an anomaly. A single pulse of structured energy, faint but deliberate, laced with patterns no natural source could produce. The technicians argued whether it was an echo of old jump routes or the scattered signature of a derelict. Some claimed it was nothing more than interference from the storms of a nearby nebula. Yet the pulse came again, stronger, rhythmic. A deep space frigate was dispatched, its crew certain they would return with evidence of a simple stellar quirk. They joked over the comms, laughing about hunting for fairy tailies. The word human became their punchline, a running jest to break the monotony of their voyage. But when they reached the coordinates, the laughter began to fade. There was no quirk, no stellar storm. Hanging in the void was a shape no one could identify, vast and silent. Not a derelict, not a council design, nor any rival empire's craft. Its hull swallowed starlight, blacker than the void itself, with geometry that seemed at once alien and purposeful. The frigate scanned it again and again, and yet the readings made no sense. The vessel bore no broadcast signature, no transponder, no emissions at all. It was a ghost, and yet unmistakably it was alive. One transmission was sent back to the Council. A single sentence from the frigate's captain, his voice stripped of humor, his pride dissolved into unease. It matches the old descriptions. When the sky went dark, the Council assembled in emergency session. The chamber that had once laughed now trembled with tension as the signal was replayed, as images of the vessel, grainy and distorted but undeniable, flashed across the chamber's walls. Delegates whispered, then argued, then shouted. Some still refused to believe. A trick of our enemies. A fabrication by dissidents. Nothing but a shadow of our own imaginations. But then the skis themselves testified. From dozens of systems, reports streamed in, fleets vanishing without distress signals, stations going silent, border posts cut off in an instant. On every world where the Council's banners flew, the stars dimmed. Shadows passed across orbital arrays, swallowing suns in their wake. Entire sectors reported the same phrase, spoken in hushed horror. The sky has gone dark. It was not a metaphor. The strange vessels, each one vast enough to eclipse light, arrived silently, blotting out suns, surrounding worlds like hunters encircling prey. They did not hail. They did not negotiate. They only moved precise and unrelenting, as though they had been waiting for this very hour. The Council chambers fell silent. For the first time in 1,000 years, none dared to laugh. The silence of realization. The archivist returned. The same scholar they had mocked now stood before the Council, his trembling hands holding fragments of forgotten text. The words, once scorned, now hung heavy with meaning. They come when pride blinds empires, the fragment read. They come when myths are mocked. Their fleets are not seen until they choose. Their power is not challenged until it is too late. Every delegate in the chamber listened, as if hearing prophecy. Across the galaxy, commanders tried to respond. Fleets mobilized, weapons charged, systems aligned for war. But the legends were not exaggerations. When the first Council armadas faced the intruders, they unleashed storms of plasma, missiles, and beams that could tear moons apart. Yet their fire vanished into the void, swallowed by hulls that shimmered with impossible resilience. Then came the counterstrike. A single pulse from one human vessel silenced an entire fleet. Not destroyed, silenced. Ships floated dead in space, powerless, their crews staring out into the black as their systems flickered and died. Not a casualty, not a battle, merely silence. The delegates in the Council chamber watched in horror as live feeds displayed their fleets crumbling without resistance. They understood, in that moment, what it meant for a myth to step into reality. The weight of legends. It was not just their weapons, it was the presence. Wherever the human fleets moved, the stars themselves seemed to dim. Worlds that had once felt the eternal security of Council banners now crouched in fear beneath darkened skies. The humans did not speak, and that silence was worse than war. The galaxy had known conquerors, tyrants, destroyers, but none who came without demand, without declaration, without even acknowledgement. They moved like inevitability. The Council scrambled for negotiations, but hails were unanswered. They prepared to flee, but every jump route they turned to was already darkened. They had laughed at the myths, and now they stood at the center of them, swallowed whole. And as their despair deepened, the old legends came alive in their minds. The stories of civilizations erased, of rulers broken, of skis gone black until surrender was absolute. The myths they had dismissed were not warnings. They were memories, carried from the last time humanity walked among the stars. For humanity had not vanished, they had only waited. Whispers in the dark. The Great Council was silent when the final message arrived. It did not come through their systems. It did not use their channels. It came as a voice inside every mind, a whisper in the language of thought itself, clear and undeniable. We were legends because you forgot. We are reality because you mocked. The sky is dark because it is ours to give back or to keep. When the voice faded, the chambers remained hushed. None dared to answer. None dared to laugh. Outside, the sky of their capital world grew darker still, as a shape eclipsed their sun. A single human vessel, vast beyond comprehension, descended into orbit, casting its shadow across the surface. Billions looked upward and knew that everything had changed. The council, once the proud masters of the spiral arm, now sat paralyzed, their arrogance shattered, their certainties undone. And across the galaxy, in every whisper, in every fearful retelling, one truth spread like wildfire. The myths are real.